There are hundreds of millions of pigeons living around the world, yet in many modern cities, almost nobody thinks of them as food. In places like New York, London, Mumbai, and Istanbul, pigeons have adapted perfectly to human environments. They nest on buildings, bridges, rooftops, and subway structures, breeding throughout the year and finding food wherever people leave it behind. What makes this strange is that pigeons were once valuable livestock. For thousands of years, humans raised them for meat, eggs, fertilizer, religious ceremonies, and communication. A young pigeon, known as squab, produces tender, protein-rich meat and requires surprisingly little space compared with conventional livestock. So how did an animal once associated with agriculture become something people now call a pest? The answer is not simply disease. It is a story involving cities, social class, warfare, industrial farming, economics, and cultural perception. Thousands of years ago, humans unknowingly created the perfect habitat for the wild rock dove. Stone buildings offered cliffs, ledges, holes, and sheltered nesting places similar to the environments these birds naturally preferred. The pigeons moved closer to people. Humans noticed their usefulness. And slowly, one of history's oldest relationships between humans and birds began. For humans too, ancient civilizations quickly discovered that pigeons could provide for more than occasional meat. In Egypt, farmers developed pigeon towers made from mud brick, some rising several stories high. Inside were hundreds or even thousands of nesting spaces where breeding pairs could continuously produce young birds. The system was remarkably efficient. Pigeons consumed grain, farmers collected their young for food, and their droppings returned valuable nutrients to the soil. The same bird could provide meat and fertilizer while requiring little land. Pigeons became important across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Asia. Romans constructed dedicated pigeon houses and developed methods for feeding and breeding birds for wealthy households. Medieval European nobles later treated pigeon keeping as a privilege. In England, large dovecots became symbols of landownership and status. But this privilege created a serious problem. Pigeons fed on grain grown by ordinary farmers, while the birds belonged to landowners. Resentment grew. During the French Revolution, angry peasants destroyed aristocratic dovecots. They were not necessarily rejecting pigeon meat. They wanted control over the birds and the food they represented. For centuries, pigeon remained a respected source of protein. Then another transformation began, one that would eventually push the bird away from Western dinner tables. Pigeons became even more important during the scientific and military eras. Charles Darwin bred different pigeon varieties while developing ideas that would shape evolutionary biology. He observed dramatic differences between breeds and used them as evidence that selective breeding could create variation from one ancestor. The birds also became extraordinary messengers. Their homing ability allowed them to carry information across dangerous distances when other communication systems failed. During wars, messenger pigeons delivered military reports through gunfire and sometimes saved entire units from disaster. That heroic reputation created a strange cultural shift. A bird once raised for the dinner table was increasingly celebrated as loyal, brave, and patriotic. At the same time, industrialization changed cities. Domestic pigeons escaped from lofts, racing programs, and damaged buildings. Their descendants established feral populations in urban centers. The city gave pigeons everything they needed: food waste, shelter, warm structures, and countless nesting ledges. But people no longer saw them as livestock. They saw them as unauthorized animals occupying human spaces. The famous phrase, "rats with wings," captured this attitude perfectly. Once pigeons were mentally placed alongside vermin, their ancient history as food became impossible to remember. The bird had not changed dramatically. Human perception had. Disease concerns helped strengthen the modern dislike of pigeons, but the reality is more complicated. Pigeons can carry pathogens, especially in accumulated droppings, and poorly managed waste can create health risks. However, those risks are not the same as saying pigeon meat is inherently unsafe. The important distinction is how exposure happens. Breathing contaminated dust from heavily soiled enclosed spaces can be dangerous, while properly handled and thoroughly cooked meat follows a different transmission pathway. Meanwhile, chicken became cheaper during the 20th century. Companies developed efficient systems for breeding, feeding, processing, packaging, and transporting chickens. Modern broilers can reach market weight in only a few weeks. That economic transformation changed everything. Chicken became cheap, familiar, and available everywhere. Pigeon farming could not compete with an industrial system producing quantities of standardized meat. As chicken prices fell, pigeon farming declined across the West. Breeding programs disappeared, culinary knowledge faded, and fewer consumers encountered pigeon as food. Then the cultural feedback loop became powerful. People stopped seeing pigeons as livestock because they stopped eating them. They stopped eating them because they were considered dirty. And they considered them dirty partly because they were no longer recognized as livestock. Meanwhile, countries that preserved their culinary traditions continued eating pigeon without the same stigma. Today, pigeon remains a normal food in parts of the world. Egyptian families still prepare stuffed pigeon, Moroccan cuisine uses pigeon in dishes such as pastilla, and Cantonese restaurants serve roasted pigeon with crisp skin. Raised squab remains part of fine dining. The key point is that the species itself did not become less edible. What changed was the environment around it. Cities expanded, farming industrialized, recipes faded, and ideas about cleanliness became powerful. Food choices are inherited habits rather than decisions made from evidence alone. The rock dove was domesticated long ago. It fed ancient farmers, families, soldiers, and communities. It carried messages during wars and helped Darwin understand evolution. Yet quickly, industrial agriculture and urban culture transformed its image from valuable livestock into unwanted wildlife. The pigeon itself did not become useless. Our relationship with it changed. And that raises a question: how many other foods, animals, and traditions have disappeared from our lives not because they became worse, but because the story surrounding them changed? Perhaps the most fascinating part of the pigeon story is that the bird never needed to reinvent itself. Humans did that for it. We changed its role, changed our language, changed our cities, and eventually changed what we believed belonged on a dinner plate. The pigeon stayed the same. We simply stopped seeing it the same way.